Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever in the world you are. Sorry, this was supposed to be at 6 o'clock UK time, but it's nearly 3/4 of an hour late. My apologies for that. I want to talk about ignorance and stupidity today. And in the picture there, I've got a picture of a snake. What has that got to do with ignorance and stupidity, you may want to ask? Well, everything. According to my biology teacher, snakes are nothing more than lizards that have lost their limbs because they didn't use them. Evolution is the habit of if you do not use something, you lose it. I just played the short video explaining exactly what I'm talking about.
Due to many features throughout their body, it is known that snakes definitely evolved from a group of lizards that over time adapted to lose their legs. The most primitive of modern snakes, like pythons and boas, even still have tiny hind leg bones buried in muscles towards their tail ends. DNA evidence shows that they are most closely related to monitor lizards and iguanas, and it is thought that snakes and some of the venomous lizards may have all descended from the same venomous ancestor as well, and they are grouped together under the name Toxicifera.
While I don't need to bore you sick with any more detail, we'll leave it at that. One of the things that we have got in Zimbabwe is ignorance. Ignorance on its own is not such a bad thing. In fact, if anything at all, ignorance motivates people to learn. And the process of learning is a lifetime process. And those who are afraid to make mistakes will not learn. And if you don't know, try it. If it doesn't work, you accept that it didn't work, you learn something from it. So ignorance per se is not a bad thing. But I'll be the first one to admit also that ignorance is definitely an inconvenience because there are some times when, because of ignorance, you pay for it. Albert Einstein said that doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, is insanity. In other words, you should really learn. When you've done something, it doesn't work, you get one result, and you repeat it again and get the same result. And after doing it a few times, you quickly realize that there's no point in expecting a different result. This is the correct result. In Zimbabwe, we've been participating in flawed and illegal elections for 43 years, and I'm counting. And believe it or not, we've just had elections this last August, and they produced the same result. But believe it or not, many people out there believed that it was going to produce a different result. That is insanity. That is stupidity. The stupid are invariably ignorant. But worse than that, the stupid think they know. And they keep on doing the same thing because they believe they know better, that the result will change. And so stupidity has become a curse, worse than death itself, because stupidity can make an enemy of yourself. You become your own worst enemy because you're stupid. I believe the real challenge in Zimbabwe, after 43 years of rigged elections, is for the people to ask themselves, are you stupid or are you ignorant? Are you going to learn something from holding elections that are so flawed, so illegal, that the only rational thing for you to do is to stop participating? And yet, you keep on participating. There is no doubt that we are looking at 2023 elections. These elections were flawed. Many people pointed out that participating was sheer futility. You participate in these elections knowing fully well that they are so flawed, there is going to be definitely only one winner, Zanu PF. And what is more, you also participate knowing fully well that by participating, you are giving Zanu PF legitimacy. Why? For the opposition, the answer was simple. They also knew that Zanu PF was offering a few gravy train seats, and those they found irresistible. And hence the reason they participated. But what about the ordinary people? Did they know that by participating, they're only giving Zanu PF legitimacy and thus perpetuating the dictatorship? Well, they should have known. Because there's been a mountain of evidence out there proving that point. Many people have said it over and over again. If they failed to pick up that information, well, that's ignorance. The question then becomes, is this ignorance or stupidity? By participating in the 2023 elections, I believe that we gave SADC leaders the excuse to do nothing. Because even after the SADC election observers themselves came up with a report that condemned the elections as a farce, SADC leaders still decided to do nothing about it, to ignore the report. One of the consistent reasons why they would have done that is simple. If the people of Zimbabwe themselves knew these elections were flawed, and illegal. Why did they keep on participating? We cannot, as Zimbabweans, deny the fact that we Zimbabweans had the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms which would have stopped Zanu PF breaking the elections during the 2008 to 2013 GNU. I think the failure to acknowledge that also would have made SADC leaders stop to think that these people do not even appreciate that they lost the opportunity during the GNU. What hope is there that they've changed now? And honestly, the answer has got to be, well, there's no justification. There is no reason why we should seriously think they would have changed now. And so we gave SADC leaders the excuse to say, well, if Zimbabweans are happy with the system they've got, we should do nothing about it. Indeed, I think one can also argue that even SADC had stepped in and had said to Mnangagwa, the election process was flawed and illegal. And therefore, then we cannot grant you legitimacy. For the sake of argument, they had come up with a perfect democratic system, gave it to us in a silver platter. I do not believe that that system would have survived in the current political situation in Zimbabwe. Democracy, as the Greeks learned to whom the world owns this system of governance, democracy, government of the people, by the people, for the people. The Greeks learned 1,500 years ago that democracy only works if the citizens are educated and they are diligent. There's no point in saying power to the people when those people do not know what that power is and how to use it. And so even if SADC had stepped in and had removed Mnangagwa for rigging the elections, for the sake of argument, had installed a government of technocrats who would have implemented all the democratic reforms and gave Zimbabweans a perfect democratic system. But as long as the people themselves are not educated, I do not believe that democratic system would have survived. This is why it is imperative that Zimbabweans really now seriously look themselves in the mirror and ask themselves, am I ignorant or am I stupid? The country's destiny will depend on how honestly people answer that question. I hope men will come out with the answer, I'm ignorant, and take the right measures to educate themselves. What is democracy? What constitutes free, fair, and credible, etc., etc. Because without an educated electorate, we will be going over and over the same issue without ever making any progress. As I said, one of the problems with stupid people is that they think they know, when in reality, they don't. And I think it is one of the problems with stupidity. They are stubborn. They think they don't need to know. One of the problems we have had, why we have failed to make any meaningful progress in terms of ending the Zanu PF dictatorship, is that for the last 23 years, we have elected an opposition that once in power, it was easily corrupted by Zanu PF, and they forgot all about the reforms. We, the people, have failed to realize that. We still think that Nelson Chamisa and this Triple C are our best hope. Best hope in what way? They failed to implement even one meaningful democratic change in 23 years, 5 of which included the GNU. We need these reforms to be implemented if we're going to have free, fair, and credible elections. If we're going to ever stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. If we are ever going to have a competent, accountable government. The first step here is accepting that the opposition, we've entrusted the job of implementing the reforms, are not up to the task. To keep on stubbornly persisting that they will do it when you've got 23 years and you don't even have one reform that they've implemented is being stupid. It's being stubborn. It's maintaining with this belief that I know Chamisa will do it. How do you know? You refuse to accept the evidence before you that MDC, Triple C have failed to implement even one meaningful reform. They are participating in these elections out of greed. You refuse to accept those realities on the ground. That is being stupid. I think we need to wake up. As I said, the brain, human brain, is actually the most sophisticated organ in life. And that is what has put human beings above all other creatures. That is the single organ that has allowed human beings to come up with such marvels as rockets exploring deep into space, to be able to split the smallest object you can think of, an atom, to its barest constituent bodies. It's the brain. But that organ, too, is one of the weakest, in the sense that if you do not use it, you will lose it. And I believe that in Africa, I think most people out there have not been using their brain, and it has ossified into fat. And they stubbornly maintain that they know when they don't know. Zimbabwe is a failed state because we failed to govern ourselves. That is a fundamental truth that anyone who wants to be honest and to learn has got to accept and to do something about it. Ignorance is not a curse. At its best, ignorance is what motivates people to learn. I don't know something, you become curious, you want to learn it. That is what it should be. We have made a mistake, we've failed to implement, to get an opposition that will implement the democratic reforms. That was a mistake. Let's admit it. After 23 years of this MDC, Triple C, they failed to implement even one meaningful democratic reform. That is the reality. That is a fact, a historic fact. Now, what are we going to do about it? To stubbornly maintain that they are the best foot forward for the country is being plain stupid. And I believe SADC are punishing us for it. Now we are on our own. But the real rat race is how are we going to stop Zimbabwe repeating the same mistake in 2028? How are we going to stop Zimbabwe having yet another rigged election in 2028? That is the challenge of this generation. How, if we are ever going to tackle it at all, if we are ever going to stop Zanu PF rigging the 2028 elections, I honestly think that we can only do it if we accept that the opposition, Triple C, has not only failed to implement even one meaningful democratic reform in the last 23 years, including the 5 in the GNU, they've also been participating in flawed elections out of greed. But most important of all, that Triple C is never going to implement any democratic reform. Never. And to keep on thinking that they will is being stupid. That is the message I would like to leave everybody. If we're going to get out of this mess, we have got to do it ourselves. Nobody is going to rescue Zimbabweans out of this mess. And if we continue the way we are going, we will only be confirming that most of us have actually lost the capacity to think. Our brain is ossified, turning brain tissue to useless fat. We are nothing more than the snake. While the snake took generations to lose their legs, we seem to have lost our legs, our brains, in a lifetime, in fact. I think Zimbabweans are facing a serious challenge, but not an impossible one. We have got to face ourselves in the mirror and accept that we have made serious mistakes. And there's nothing wrong with making a mistake as long as you learn from it. Refusing to learn from it is not going to help this country. It's not going to get us out of this mess. And the simple test of it will come 2028. If nothing changes, I can tell you now that Zanu PF will rig the 2028 elections, just as they rigged the elections in the last 43 years. And will be where we are today, stuck with a corrupt, incompetent, tyrannical Zanu PF dictatorship. And meanwhile, the country will be sinking deeper and deeper into the abyss. That is the challenge. I have got a comment from somebody here. He says, is Kampala. The Zimbabwe scenario is complex. We don't know whether Triple C is a genuine opposition or is another money-hungry group. Kampala, I think we do know. After 23 years, MDC, Triple C have failed to implement even one meaningful democratic reform. What more do you need to convince you that they're not up to the task? We can't keep on. We can bury our heads in the sand, but that is only being stubborn. Who are we trying to deceive there? We have seen enough in Zimbabwe to make up our own minds regarding the opposition. At the present moment, forget about Zanu PF. Zanu PF would be history by now if the opposition had been competent and they had implemented the democratic reforms when they had the golden opportunity to do so. And so the focus is on making sure we have got a competent opposition that will implement the reforms. But for some reason, some people seem to be putting the cart before the horse. They accept that the opposition have failed, but for some reason, they still maintain that we must give them a chance. A chance to do what? Another 23 years with not even one reform implemented? That is being stupid. We have got enough evidence to show that we really have a corrupt and incompetent opposition. And I find it unbelievable that Zimbabweans out there still want to maintain that Triple C is somehow going to be the one that will save the nation. That's just being stubborn. That's just being stupid. As I said, The answer we've got to ask ourselves, look ourselves in the mirror and ask ourselves, am I ignorant or am I stupid? Ignorance is not a case. At the best of times, it helps you to learn. Stupidity, on the other hand, is a curse, particularly when the stupid believe they know, when in reality, they don't know. Even when presented with a mountain of evidence, they still come up with the wrong conclusion. That is stupidity. People participated in the last elections, like it or not, because they believed Chamisa when he said he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. And like all simple-minded people, when Chamisa claimed that God is in it, that was it. Even the doubting Thomases immediately say, oh, well, that is it. If he says God is in it, God must be in it. God does not need Chamisa to speak for him. And it's not everybody who claims that he is speaking for God, who is in reality speaking for God. And when one makes a claim that Triple C is going to win big because God is in it, and then Triple C does not win big, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to come to the conclusion that Chamisa was lying. Chamisa was taking you for a ride. Chamisa was taking you for a fool, because he was taking you for a fool. But if you are going to stupidly believe that he wasn't, well, that is your problem. I think as a nation, we really have got to move on. These next 5 years are going to be a serious challenge. Because if we believe there's only anybody who's going to help us get out of this mess, forget it. I believe SADC had the opportunity to help us, and they decided they're not going to lift a finger. So we are on our own. We have got to rely on ourselves to get out of this mess. If 2028 is another rigged election, we have got to say to ourselves, it is our problem. We are to blame for it. And it is true, we are to blame for it. We, meaning all Zimbabweans out there. Thank you very much for listening. And with that, I'll say good night. I'll be back tomorrow. I promise this time I'll be on time, 6 o'clock UK time. Thank you again, and